Weird Victorian etiquette rules. This is probably one of the most bizarre era of human history. The Victorian manners are a fascinating study for most people. It's funny to see how weird Victorian etiquette range from the mostly harmless to the straight-up appalling customs. But before we dig into some of the Victorian rules, please take a moment to hit the red subscribe button. While you're at it, ring the bell once, and you'll make the world a better place. Thank you. Now let's begin. Swallowing tapeworm larvae to maintain a fashionably trim figure. Though voluptuous women with curves were generally celebrated in the Victorian era, the well-bred and fashion-conscious lady still made a modestly respectable effort to maintain her figure. And what better way to do that than to let a giant tapeworm devour your fat from the inside out? That's not all, though. Larvae also helped women to cultivate proper table manners, ostensibly because a woman would never rise hungry from the table, yet she would continue losing weight. Sleeping with raw meat lashed to your face. In the Victorian era, there was nothing like plastering a piece of flesh to your flesh, and hoping that its youthful essence would infiltrate your own. After all, a well-bred lady always shot for a snow-white complexion, and if it took a sacrificial lamb to maintain said whiteness, so be it. Wearing nipple shields. Breastfeeding was generally left to wet nurses back in the day, well, at least in the upper-class households. The well-bred biological mother was also known to occasionally participate, but not without the discreet and proper aid of a nipple shield. Avoiding inappropriate kissing and handling. During the Victorian era, a gentlemanly behavior was more or less akin to mailroom etiquette. Single women, for example, were never to indulge in behavior with a man that might lead to being kissed or handled in any way. This included strict inspection rules, like many of the stipulations that accompany shipping procedures. If a man wanted to admire a necklace, the woman had to remove it and hand it over for inspection. Under no circumstances was the item to be inspected while she wore it. Passing out to express yourself. The Victorian custom of swooning in response to bad news, moral scandals, or just about anything that was deemed too unseemly to be handled, was actually way ahead of its time. 100 years later, gaggles of teens would be doing the very same thing over the Beatles, Charles Manson, and Elvis. Passing out wasn't so much about being overwhelmed, as it was about expressing oneself in a socially acceptable fashion. Fashion etiquette, crinolines and corsets. The Victorians firmly believed in the importance of wearing the appropriate clothing at every occasion. Undoubtedly, the most famously ridiculous item of a Victorian woman's wardrobe was the crinoline. As a substitute for layers of heavy petticoats, these wide steel-constructed domed cages held women's skirts far from their legs. Such devices made it easy to use the chamber pot, perhaps, but maneuvering in small spaces became a challenge. Probably no other article of clothing better represented Victorians than the corset, which was essential for a Victorian woman. These tight-fitting undergarments helped one stay erect and even represented a sense of self-respect. Street etiquette. Strict guidelines govern social interaction on promenades and public thoroughfares, especially between the sexes. A young unmarried woman would not go out without an escort. Etiquette forbade young ladies from looking around for acquaintances or stopping to chat in a crowded thoroughfare. Visiting etiquette. When a formal visit was accepted or arranged, one wouldn't wear anything showy. Etiquette dictated plain walking costume. Because of tradition, these calls were known as morning calls, but by Victorian times, they were hardly ever performed before noon. In the 18th century, morning simply meant before dinner. Shaking hands was an inappropriate term implicating a firm, vigorous shake. Instead, one must apply only gentle pressure and slight movement from the wrist. And of course, a gentleman never initiated taking a lady's hand. Courtship. Etiquette books of the day advised readers to look only within their own class for a mate. Men generally married younger women. One book advised that a 30-year-old man is suited to a 22-year-old woman, and a 40-year-old man is suited to a 27-year-old woman. All out or available girls made sure to be in town during the season, a period of social events, beginning in January but accelerating in April through June, that served essentially as a marriage market. And, if a young lady couldn't snatch a husband in 3 seasons, she would start resigning herself to spinsterhood. As we reflect upon these customs, we probably wonder, how did the people living back then survived with all the rules? How did those rules seem to you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.